We're going over today on System TES, Talmud Eser Sefirot, Part 1, Tzimtzum, Restriction, and Kav Line. We'll be going over Chapter 7 today of Inner Reflection. First we'll go over some concepts again, that we go over each time. The first rule that we go over when we're trying to understand Talmud Eser Sefirot, we go over the unnecessary, is when we think that we're reading Kabbalah material that it's talking about reality, when actually it's talking about perception, and that's how we make it necessary for our advancement. The second rule is impossible. When we think it's talking about the past, let's say we read about breaking of the vessels, we think it happened before we were born. That's an impossible state to reach. The idea is that you make it possible by understanding that that state is in the future, that we're going to go through the breaking of the vessels after the barrier, not that we went through it before we were born. And then finally, in secrets, when we think it's talking about others, and we disclose the wisdom to us, we understand it's talking about ourselves. So it's not talking about some creature that happened, or somebody else, or some other rabbi. It's talking about ourselves. We go through this path. So we go through states of perception in our future, and it's ourselves that we're talking about the entire way. Here are the phases before the barrier. We are born. Everyone starts in Enoshut, which is humanity, phase 1. And these are the 4 phases of direct light, but instead of learning it as something that happened to a creature long ago, we learn it as these are the 4 phases of direct light we go through before the barrier, since the first restriction is the barrier. So we're born into humanity, which is 1.1, which is unformed humanity, which are base desires for food, sex, and family. Then we reach 1.2, which is chaos humanity, when we reach business desires, which are money, honor, and knowledge. Then we get our passive point in the heart at some point, and that brings us to 1.3, darkness humanity, where we either, if we're religious, we become more, extra religious, ultra orthodox, let's say, or if we're secular, we become religious, or we look for mysticism, or we try to travel excessively amount, or go to all different mystical places. Then we reach 1.4, spirituality, which is when we learn about Kabbalah. And then we reach phase 2, which is the Cheva Uchanit, the spiritual society. 2.1, which is called the unformed society, is when we reach connection, which is when we normally join the society and we learn how we need to connect with each other. Then we reach 2.2, chaos society, so we learn about mutual guarantee, so it's already having responsibility over that connection. Then if people continue to advance, they reach their active point in the heart when they want an active participation in their advancement. That's 2.3, darkness society, where they feel the society limitations, or they feel obstinance desires, where they are basically, they want to do something, but they don't know what to do, so they just basically start eating their own flesh, and they start eating themselves up, and just really don't know what to do with themselves. And they might cry a lot, or go all different situations of pain, but they don't really know how to move forward. And then finally we reach 2.4, spirit society, when we understand that what we need to do is start clearing concepts. The reason why we're not advancing is because our understanding of what needs to be done is incorrect. So we read a word like bestow, and we think we know what it is, and we don't understand what it is. We read a word egoism, we think it's bad, and when it's actually good, and we need to use our ego. Then we reach phase 3, kvutza, group. 3.1, unformed group, where we have the correct goal, which is to become the creator. Unlike phase 2, which wants to be like the creator, that means it wants to bestow in the quality of reception. We understand the correct goal is actually to get the quality of bestowal, so we want to receive bestowal instead of bestowing in reception.
But on 2.3, the person already knows that the goal is that.
But he's not focusing on it. He's focusing on the misery of self. They're not focusing on how to advance with that goal.
And in 2.3, what are the reasons for eating one's own flesh?
I think it's best for you to read Article 33 at the moment, where I talk about that much more into depth, where I talk about the obstinance, desires, society limitation. Continue 3.2, chaos group, where we deal with emotional concepts. We take the concepts that were intellectual before, when we start feeling the sensations towards them, we make them emotional. Then we reach 3.3, darkness group. When we deal with our pinpoint, each class has its own pinpoints. We have to find out which class we are. I'd refer to Article 22, classes of the soul, for that one. At some point we reach 3.4, which is the spirit group, where we have anticipation that we're going to be growing our ego, and our ego actually starts to grow. We've already left Egypt, it's called. We reach that anticipation. And then we reach phase 4, Yichidei Sgula, the individual phase, where we reach 4.1, unformed individual, where we have doubts. This is called the war of Amalek, which in Gematria is Safek, which is doubts. And the idea is you have this internal war within you between your faith and your reason, and you have to actually answer your reason correctly, and then basically continue growing your ego accordingly. Then you reach 4.2, the chaos individual. It's when you have to start taking responsibility over yourself. You understand that your subconscious materializes, manifests your reality, and you have to start taking responsibility over that in potential so that you can correct it after the barrier. And then in 4.3, darkness individuals, when you feel vulnerable, you understand that you're not actually doing any, that even though you're doing actions of bestowal, they aren't bestowal. They're just bestowal in reception, and it's not true bestowal. That if you want true bestowal, or if you want a state of bestowal, that can only be after the barrier. So you need to feel that vulnerability of that you don't have anything, so you can get the quality of bestowal. Then in 4.4, the spirit individual, you reach that. And in 4.4.2, you basically have a specific correction that you have to do of accepting. Normally it's a quality, but it's normally based on some person. You have to accept the quality that's bothering you before the barrier. Once you've worked on accepting that quality, then you can reach 4.4.4, which is that excitement and elevation, and then you cross the spiritual barrier. Reality vis perception. So it is that normally when we learn Kabbalah, we learn it as Ein Sof, that the Creator had the thought of creation, and then from Ein Sof, we went through all these different states, all the way down to this world, and then we're told that we're in this world, and that we have to go back up. With which, this is Metziut, reality, and we have to go back up to the beginning. We learn it a little different here in system concepts. We learn it that in our perception, and that's Tfisat Metziut, we're actually in a situation that we have no details. We're actually still in, even though our reality is in this world, our perception is actually still a boundless light. And what we have to do is that we have to actually grow, go through all the exact same states that we did when we came down. We have to go through back up. So we have to go from Ein Sof until we cross the barrier, then we reach primordial man. And then we go through, Nikudim, and then we go through Etzilut, which is emanation. Then we go through creation, formation, action. And then finally, at end of correction is when we reach this world. And then we have an alignment between our form, which is at this world, and our matter, which is at this world. So our matter is reality, and our form is our perception. So we have an alignment between our perception and our reality at the end of correction. Righteous vs. wicked. So when someone's in a state of wicked, it's when they have a misalignment between their vessels and the lights. So they're trying to take, for example, a spiritual perception power, and they're trying to receive it in a physical reality filling. So for example, states of power are normally received to us as states of tension. And then we're meant to receive them in our vessels of power, which then we're meant to convert them from tension to power. And physical reality fillings are designed to just fill us. They don't come as tension, like food or family and stuff like that. They're not meant to come as tension. They come in as filling. And they're meant to fill our vessels of filling. But when we're trying to use them to fill vessels of power, when we're trying to use food, for example, or drugs or sex to fill that inner emptiness, right? That's a state of wicked, where you're trying to use a state of filling for a state of power. The reason why it's called wicked is because you're basically saying that the Creator did it wrong, that the reality is misconfigured. The misconfiguration is in your perception, that you have to align. When it comes in, you have to understand that food is for food, and discernments are to grow your perception. And food will never grow your perception. So in the righteous state, it's when you have an alignment between the filling. So for example, food goes into a vessel for filling for food, and tension goes into the vessel for power. So when you have a situation of tension, you understand you need more internal power for that situation, and then you basically raise a prayer for more power. So you're not going to be able to raise more power when you're eating food. You can raise more power when you have a situation of tension. Someone's bothering you. There's a certain situation you can't overcome. That you're meant to raise that as a prayer, that I need more internal power to handle the situation. And that's called a state of righteousness.
Is it proper to raise a prayer for internal power when we get a plateau due to an emotional overload?
So the idea is that's a situation of tension. That's exactly when you should be raising a prayer. And you should be asking yourself for more internal power, to reveal more internal power to your consciousness, instead of just having it in your subconscious. Chapter 7. Emptiness of all desires. Although only Bechina Daled, fourth discernment, was restricted, the Or light left the first three Bechinot discernments as well. Number 27. It has already been explained that the middle point, which is the comprehensive point of the thought of creation, namely the will to receive in it, embellished herself to equalize herself with the Matzil emanator more intensely. From the perspective of the Matzil emanator, there is no Shinitzua change of form in his almightiness. However, the point of the Ratzon, desire, felt it as a kind of indirect Hamshacha, attraction from his essence, as with the story about the rich man. For that reason, she diminished her Ratzon, desire, from the lost Bechina discernment, which the entire will to receive in its Gadlut, greatness, so as to increase the Dvikut adhesion through a direct Hamshacha, attraction from his essence. Then the Or, light, was emptied from the entire place, meaning from all 4 degrees that exist in the place, even though she diminished her Ratzon, desire, only from Bechina Daled, fourth discernment. It is the nature of the spiritual that it is indivisible. Afterwards, a Kav, line of Or, light, extended once more from the first 3 Bechinot discernments, and Bechina Daled, fourth discernment, remained a vacant halal emptiness. So the idea is that before we cross the barrier, when we're at 4.4.4, in that elevated state, we have so much importance for the quality of bestowal. And then what happens is we shift from the quality of reception. Wanted to ask something, Daniel? We shift from the quality of reception to the quality of bestowal. This shift from the quality of reception to quality of bestowal is called the restriction. And then the idea is that you feel like the light has left the entire vessel, because beforehand you were used to being in that elevated state within the will to receive, that you're going to receive the bestowal. When you actually enter the quality of bestowal, you're basically in emptiness. You have nothing there. It's like something new. It's like entering a new house where there's no furniture. Right? So you're moving from a previous house with furniture. You're moving to a new house without furniture. So it's displayed here as all the light is disappearing. The light is not actually disappearing. The idea is that you're just in this new quality, so it looks like it's empty. Structure after the barrier. Number 28. After that orange of boundless light, Nimshach is attracted once more to the place that was emptied, but did not fill the entire place in all 4 Bechinot discernments, but only 3 Bechinot discernments, as was the Ratzon, desire of the point of the Tzimtzum restriction. Hence the middle point that had been restricted remained empty and hollow, because the aura light illuminated only as low as Bechina Daled, fourth discernment, but not all the way, and Or Ein Sof, boundless light, stopped there. We will henceforth explain the matter of kalalut, mingling, of the Bechinot discernments in one another in the upper worlds. You can now see that the 4 Bechinot discernments are integrated into one another in such a way that within Bechina Daled, fourth discernment, there are also all 4 Bechinot discernments. Thus, Or Ein Sof, boundless light, reached the first 3 Bechinot discernments in Bechina Daled, fourth discernment, and she alone remained empty and without or light. What it's trying to say is that after you go through the restriction, when you feel that state of emptiness, normally it takes about 3 days, then you reach, it's called the giving of the Torah, where you receive your first lights. It's called the face of Galgalta. And the idea is that the light comes in all the way and you feel that amazing feeling of being above, but the only state, which is not filled, is that dalit in the dalit. The fourth discernment inside the fourth discernment is empty. Why? Because that is your intense ego. And the idea is if your intense ego was filled as well, you would basically fall back into your ego. So to avoid you falling back into your ego, your screen protects you by allowing the light to only come to that point, but not actually enter it. So then you can feel that sensation of eternal, feeling great, amazing, but without actually feeling that intense ego that you built before the barrier.
So here is the difference between the coming down of the worlds and the going up through the worlds, because Adam didn't have that restriction, and that's why he fell.
What do you mean?
Like according to the sources, Adam, like in the past or history, there wasn't that restriction. So he did receive that immense light into his own ego, and that's why he shattered. So there's a difference between this, the structure of above down and the structure from below up.
The reason why he shattered was because there was the restriction. You shattered because of the restriction. If there was no restriction, you wouldn't shatter. The reason you shatter is because of the restriction. The restriction, it's like trying to go down. It's like cheese going through a grating, like a grater. How do you call it? Grater? What do you call that thing? To grate cheese. What do you call that device?
A grater.
Yeah, grater. Okay. So it's like putting cheese through a grater, right? The grater is like a restriction. So what happens when you put cheese through the grater? It breaks, right? It shatters, you could say. Right? So the idea is that you've got a, precisely because you've got that restriction, when you're trying to force something through it, it basically breaks.
So Adam also broke, was on 2.3 after the barrier, not on 1.1.
No, the breaking of, are you eating Kellogg's or something? Every time you turn off it, you hear like a, the idea is like this. In our advancement, when we go from this, in our perception, you go through the breaking of Adam Rishon, you go through it in 4.4.1. So when you reach 4.4.1, after the barrier, of course, that's when you go through breaking of Adam Rishon. It's something you go through. So the idea is just like you go through it in your perception, when it was going down in reality, the breaking of Adam Rishon was in that 4.4.1. I think we'll stop here and enter the after party.